All right, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Renee Savoy from the State Department of Education. I work in the Performance Office. Thank you so much for joining this webinar that we're holding in partnership with NACEP. This is the fourth in a series. This session is about evaluation, so collecting and using program data. We will be recording this session. We are recording this session, and I will send a link to the recording once it's posted on our YouTube channel. I will send that around to everyone who registered, which includes all of you. And it'll also be posted on the Dual Credit Opportunities site. Um, so if you've been to some of these meetings, we've definitely met some. I know we have district partners here on the call, but we also have representatives from our institutions of higher ed who are partnering with us on these expansion efforts. You probably received a message from me indicating that the work around the actual dual credit expansion, not the data, but the dual credit expansion efforts are actually transitioning from the performance office over to the Office of Strategic Planning and Partnerships. And I know Katie Atkinson, my colleague, is on the call. If you got that message from me about the transition, you probably saw Katie's name. So she's going to be someone that you'll be very familiar with. She and her colleague, Karen Emaker, are going to be leading a lot of the work that I was sort of coordinating. So I'm sure you're in good hands with Katie and Karen, and that work will continue. The performance office will continue to be the part of the agency that does data collection and reporting and whatnot. So we're not getting out of that business. We are still alive and well in that arena, and so we'll still see each other and hear from each other. And I want to wish you all well before I turn it over and we get going. So today we're going to have Diane is going to kick us off. You're probably all familiar with Diane. You've met her before, and I'll turn it over to you, Diane.
Thanks so
Thanks.
much, Renee. I appreciate it. And looking forward to working with a new group, but it's been wonderful working with you, Renee and Ajit. So thanks so much. So this webinar is about data or data, if you will. Um, where do we begin to talk about data? I mean, there's so much out there. What is it? There's the what's, the hows, the who's, the where's, and most importantly, how can data help you improve your dual credit programming? What's it look like? How do you disaggregate it? Who collects it? So some of those questions hopefully will answer for you today. Renee, thanks. So this is just a quick look at the agenda for today. I'm going to do a quick overview about NACEP. Most of you already know who we are, so I'll make that very quick. Then we're going to hear from Tatiana Vascallo on kind of a national view of data in the post-secondary world. She's going to give you some really good information about what's come out recently with iPads and other data. Then we're going to hone in a little bit closer to Connecticut. And Danielle is going to kind of go over more of the Connecticut department's data system. And then we'll put it all together with Ray Chart. Ray is going to show you guys how he at Ames College works with his partners to provide information to improve his programming and hopefully give you guys some great tidbits on what you can do to help once you have all that data collected, how you can use it to improve your program. So just a quick overview of NACEP for those of you who I have not met yet. I'm Diane Leslie Barker, and I'm the Director of State Engagement for NACEP. And NACEP supports and advances and unifies the field of dual credit, dual enrollment, college and high school, whichever term you choose to use, around quality college credit programming for high school students. We serve the field by providing a framework for best practices that aligns with common standards and policies on how to build and manage your dual credit programs. These national quality standards or best practices, if you will, ensure the best possible outcome for your students, for practitioners, institution, districts, and overall your community. So NASEP supports programs by providing a framework of rigorous standards and affirming excellence through rigorous accreditation process. We support practitioners in the field as the single source for national best practices. We have peer to peer connections, national convenings, research, advocacy, and if you were able to join us 2 weeks ago at our national conference, you know exactly who we are and what we're about. And we also support policy by ensuring that the voices of practitioners is the most relevant, the most informed voice in concurrent and dual enrollment, dual credit, and it's at the table for federal and state policy conversations. So, moving ahead, I'd like to welcome Tatiana Vescaro from CCRC, or the Community College Resource Center, to talk about kind of give us an overall national view of the data in dual enrollment. So, Tatiana, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
And
Diane.
I went ahead and stopped sharing, Tatiana, so you can go ahead and share your slides.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
That looks good.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Renee, for having me and inviting us at the Community College Research Center to talk about the data. If you hear some background noise and if you'd like me to repeat something through this presentation, please raise your hand. I'm in the middle of a work trip and there's some background noise that may show up. It's unintended. What I want to do today is to kind of like give you an overview on the data sources that we've been developing at CCRC as part of the research that we've conducted with publicly available data at the national level that we've disaggregated to the extent that that's possible, and other data, particularly data from the National Student Clearinghouse that we've aggregated and analyzed in the context of our dual enrollment research to look at the post-secondary outcomes of dual enrollment students. In doing so, I'm going to be providing you some research frameworks and like a research-based framework to understand what we're seeing in the data, especially in terms of post-secondary outcomes. And I'm going to give you an overview of like the national level in the national trends in outcomes and on the outcomes for Connecticut in particular. Okay. Please feel free to stop me with questions. I cannot really look into the chat in the presentation mode. So if Renee or anyone else wants to pause and ask something in particular, I'm happy to dive in.
I can take care of that. So please feel free to put your questions in there, participants.
All right. So the first thing that I'm going to share is IPEDS data. For the first time earlier this year, IPEDS released counts of students who are effectively dual enrollment students at the national level and by institution. And the data was really revealing for us in the dual enrollment space because it gave us evidence on the explosion and growth of dual enrollment nationwide. There are 2.5 million students, high school students taking dual enrollment coursework in the past academic year, 2022 and 2023. 21% of those students are taking courses at community colleges. This is a number that has been growing over the past decades. This number almost tripled during the last 10 years or so. This number is also quite significant in the state of Connecticut. There's one important caveat that I want to raise today, particularly concerning the IPEDS data, which is that the UConn system did not report student headcounts for their early college programs, and those programs account for a sizable share of dual enrollment students in the state. In particular, there are about 50,000 students taking early college high school in UConn. So basically this 5% that we see here, which is the percentage of undergraduate students who are dual enrollment students, is underestimation of the percentage of students taking dual enrollment in the state of Connecticut. If you add what we know are the number of students taking early college high school in UConn, the percentage of students taking dual enrollment in Connecticut increases to about 12%. So since they didn't report data for IPEDS, the statistics that I'm going to be showing in the next couple of slides won't be accounted for that, accounting for that. So I do want to keep kind of like that caveat, but I also want to raise that in the data dashboard that we created, using this IPEDS data, you can kind of like disaggregate by different sectors and look at the data for specific institutions. So if you have curiosity to, dive into a specific college or into a specific sector, I do welcome you, and like I invite you to do so and to explore the data in detail. Now, as I was saying, this is the first time that we have actual dual enrollment students counts provided to IPEDS. Up until 2021, what we did was to look into the IPEDS data and look for the students who were aged 17 or younger, and we would count out those students as dual enrollment students. It's fair to say that there can be some measurement error in that maybe some students are starting as full-time college level students being 17 years old or younger, but the large majority of these students are going to be dual enrollment students. This is a trend that's national, but that reflects in the state of Connecticut as well. The number of dual enrollment students have been growing quite a lot across all sectors, virtually all sectors, community colleges and four-year institutions as well, with the caveat that post-pandemic there was a slight reduction in those numbers. Now, again, bear in mind that these numbers and these headcounts are proxies that we're using, kind of like pulling the data that has been available over the years to try to understand who are these dual enrollment students. But again, there are reporting issues to account for, and I invite you to think about your college, data reporting and context, and kind of like contrast the numbers that you see in these dashboards that we put out with what you know from your specific context and institution. So dual enrollment nationwide, going back to the nationwide picture, has become a really significant part of the enrollment at community colleges. We know that about 21%, or 1 in every 5 of the students enrolled at a community college by 2022-2023 were dual enrollment students. This is in part driven by the fact that there's been a decline in the number of older adult students taking classes at community colleges. But again, this percentage is very significant. Again, account for the fact that for Connecticut, this percentage should be closer to 15%. In about 10 states, the share of dual enrollment is about, the share of dual enrollment at community colleges is around a third of their enrollment. And there are some states where over half of the enrollment at community colleges are dual enrollment students. So this is kind of just to provide some context on what we see in the data. Now, when you look at these slides, this is the slide where you're going to find the link to this dashboard that I've been referring you to. This dashboard is going to have multiple visuals that are going to allow you to, again, look into a specific sector, specific state, nationwide. Because of the nature of the IPEDS data, you can even dive into a specific college. And so in here, what I have is the visualization for the state of Connecticut, again, for the at the institution level, disaggregated at the institution level. Another caveat for how the Connecticut data is reported to IPEDS is that Connecticut State Community Colleges, they report all the data under one institution, which means that this institution has about 12 campuses spread across the state. But if you look at the map, we can only kind of like group those numbers under one location because that's how the data is reported. So again, all these things to keep in mind as you interpret the data. And my goal today is also to provide you with some context about how to read these numbers. In this data visualization that you see here, what we report, it's also disaggregated by the student characteristics available on IPEDS again. So race and ethnicity is one of the characteristics that we focus in. And another visualization in this data dashboard is going to allow you to dive into the composition of students at a specific institution in Connecticut or at a specific sector, and compare that to the general composition of undergraduate students in that institution, in the state, and nationwide. This with the intention of provide you some insights into representation in dual enrollment relative to the college composition, right? Like ideally, you would want to see this relative to the high school cohort because high school students are the ones who are exposed and who are initially eligible to dual enrollment. But with IPEDS, we focus on the composition of the college that we're looking into. And so if you look at the bars here, you'll see the percentage of students who are dual enrollment students, kind of like disaggregated by student characteristics, and in comparison to the percentage of undergraduate students, which is the second bar, percentage of UG. That's the composition of all undergraduate students, including dual enrollment students at the institution. One nice thing about this dashboard, and that we hope is helpful for you when you're making the case and preparing presentations and documentation, and using this data to document an analysis, is that you can download these figures as an image or as a PowerPoint or as a PDF and add that into your documents. All right, so this is the most recent data that we have in dual enrollment. Again, this is a snapshot from 2022, 2023, but very novel in that we are able to actually see the numbers of dual enrollment students nationwide by state and at the college level. What I'm going to be talking about now is an analysis that we did using National Student Clearinghouse data that allowed us to track the students who started to take dual enrollment courses in the fall of 2015, all the way into their post-high school outcomes, namely post-secondary enrollment and award completion. But before I dive into that, I want to give you some context into the research of dual enrollment. Because what we've seen from experimental and quasi-experimental, as well as descriptive evidence from different states and different dual enrollment programs, is that dual enrollment does increase post-secondary outcomes to the extent that it increases college application, it increases college enrollment, it increases credit momentum, meaning students tend to get more credits in those first years. In general, dual enrollment is associated with positive outcomes, especially for those students who would benefit the most. And by students who would benefit the most, I refer to low-income students, Black and Hispanic students, who are at the margin of taking dual enrollment courses, but that at the margin of attending a post-secondary institution, but that for some reason or another end up derailing from that path. Dual enrollment can really empower these students to go for a college degree. And so with this context in mind, when we look into the data, in particular, when we look at the post-high school outcomes of the dual enrollment students, 1 year post-high school, we see that dual enrollment students nationwide enroll at a post-secondary institution at higher rates, mainly enroll at four-year institutions, even students who take their dual enrollment courses at a community college. And about a third of those students re-enrolled at the post-secondary institution where they took their dual enrollment courses. This snapshot is coming from a data dashboard as well. That data dashboard is associated with this report that you see here, this image. That's basically, that's the report summarizing all the findings from analyzing this National Student Clearinghouse data. It has a data dashboard associated to it. This report was published a month ago, so this is very, very recent data and a very recent analysis. The snapshot here is showing the outcomes within 1 year after high school for all dual enrollment students in the state of Connecticut and compared to the US average. In the data dashboard, you can also disaggregate by sector. So you can look into the students who are taking dual enrollment courses at a community college or at a four-year institution, and then track the outcomes for those students after that. In general, for the state of Connecticut, we see a relatively similar trend to compared to the national average in terms of enrollment at any college within that first year. The re-enrollment is slightly lower, but again, this is a metric for all students taking dual enrollment, and I encourage you to look into the data dashboard and disaggregate that by the sector and by the subgroups that you have an interest in. In this report and in the data dashboard, we also look at the outcomes 4 years after high school completion. So we're going to be looking at whether they completed a bachelor degree as their highest degree, whether they completed a certificate or an associate, or whether they continue to be enrolled. We also account for those students who never enrolled at a post-secondary institution. We do not observe enrolled at a post-secondary institution after 4 years from completing high school. Again, this is a snapshot for all the dual enrollment students in Connecticut. What we see is that the bachelor completion rate in general is slightly below of the students who didn't take any dual enrollment courses and who were relatively young, were between 18 and 20 years old by the time that they started college, kind of like to provide a comparable point of reference for relative to these dual enrollment students that we're looking at. So in the state of Connecticut, we see that their bachelor completion rate is slightly lower than that of non-dual enrollment students. Again, these numbers are aggregated. I invite you to dig into the data, look into specific groups. In this case, I cannot disclose because of the data sharing agreement whether some institutions did or did not report full data on their dual enrollment students in the year of 2015. So I do encourage you to look into this data with caution and with more information about the context of your specific institution or sector. When we compare these outcomes between dual enrollment students and non-dual enrollment students, bear in mind that we are not controlling for any characteristics of these students. So this cannot be interpreted as causal effects of dual enrollment in the state. But nationwide, the trend that we observe follows that we find in the research, which is that dual enrollment students in general seem to have stronger post-secondary completion outcomes, especially students from specific subgroups such as low-income, Black, and Hispanic students. The last thing that you can also observe in this dashboard is among the students who completed a bachelor, which students, the field of completion of those bachelors. Here I am focusing on STEM completion, mainly whether the bachelor completed by the student was in applied technology, engineering, computer science, and math. And in Connecticut, what we see is something that follows the national trend in terms of the field of bachelor completion among dual enrollment, which is that dual enrollment students tend to complete degrees in STEM fields at higher rates than non-dual enrollees. There's a lot of data in this dashboard. You can dissect this data again by sector, by the characteristics of students, that is gender and racial background. So I do encourage you to, again, look into it. There is a tab that allows you to do comparisons in dual enrollment student outcomes across states. When we're thinking about and when we discuss the comparisons of outcomes of one state against the other, one thing that we do encourage people to do, and it's kind of like a central part of the messages in this report, is to think about those comparisons not in terms of who's doing better or who's doing worse in terms of dual enrollment, or like just in terms of the post-secondary outcomes of their dual enrollment students, but rather in terms of the context. And I'm going to get into that in the next slide. And I want to pause here to see if there's any question.
There's nothing in the chat yet, but if people want to actually voice their question, all they have to do is raise their hand, and then I can go ahead and unmute the individual. I'm happy to do that. There really aren't many people in the meeting, so it should be fairly straightforward. I don't see anything yet. So maybe we can keep going and maybe they'll have some later.
Okay. So as I was saying, in the context of interpreting these findings on the post-secondary outcomes of dual enrollment, one thing to keep in mind, especially when looking into this college level data, is that we aren't really assessing access to dual enrollment, right? In IPEDS data and in the National Student Clearinghouse data that we analyze, we are basically looking at the students who are already dual enrollment students, right? And we're comparing them to the students who are undergraduate students, but maybe they're not taking dual enrollment, they didn't take dual enrollment courses. We compare the composition of these students, the extent to which their characteristics are similar, and so forth. But one thing that we don't get to do is to look at the challenges in access, because we know from a lot of research and a lot of evidence that in general, access to dual enrollment is pretty uneven, nationwide and across states. What I mean by that is that while dual enrollment has a lot of potential for expanding college enrollment and completion, there are persistent barriers to dual enrollment access nationwide, especially among specific subgroups. So this data here, this image here, it's an analysis that we did of the civil rights data collection data. Civil rights data collection, they provide data looking into student characteristics, including whether the students are dual enrollment students or not. And this data is collected for schools. So we can really compare the characteristics of dual enrollment students with the characteristics of the high schools that they attend to. And when we do that, what we find is that Black, Hispanic students from different groups who have been traditionally underrepresented in post-secondary education are underrepresented in dual enrollment as well. There is a lot of variation on these data in terms of like state-by-state differences. But one thing that in general is consistent is that in many states, dual enrollment programs are implemented as random acts of dual enrollment. And in some cases, those programs are program of privilege, mainly students who are able to afford the credits, students who meet the eligibility requirements, which sometimes are very stringent, students who have information about what dual enrollment is and how to make a best use of it, are the students who end up taking these courses. In our research looking into the practices around dual enrollment, we see this as strongly associated with a lack of outreach, intentional advising that aims to broaden access to dual enrollment with an intentionality of making it more even across these different groups. Now, for the state of Connecticut, we also can disaggregate the data and look into it with more detail. The representation index that I was showing in the figure before, it's basically a comparison of the percentage of students from a certain group, say Asian, in high school relative to the percentage of the students from that group who are dual enrollment students. And so when we compare that, we can see if there is overrepresentation or underrepresentation of a given group. For example, here in the state of Connecticut, using that data, we see that there is a slight overrepresentation of Asian students in dual enrollment relative to the high school composition, right? 8% relative to 5%, and of white students as well, right? We replicate this representation index using this data for the state of Connecticut and disaggregated by gender as well. We in general see similar trends in terms of representation and underrepresentation compared to what we see at the national level. I'm just gonna tap into this very briefly because I think it can really help us kind of like crystallize these conversations around access to dual enrollment and the outcomes of dual enrollment students in general. Conversations with practitioners, policymakers, and researchers have identified the major barriers to dual enrollment participation. A lot of those recommendations are in this document here, but in general, there are 3 areas where we think colleges and state leaders in dual enrollment can improve this uneven access and these uneven outcomes in dual enrollment. These 3 areas are basically policies, practices, and the mindsets around what dual enrollment is and who's eligible for dual enrollment. And in terms of improving and strategies to improve these differences in dual enrollment access and the outcomes of these dual enrollment students once they reach their post-secondary institution, we've created a set of resources that identify principles and strategies to better support students. If there are questions around these principles, I am happy to talk more about this. In general, one of our champion principles and frameworks more recently is the Dual Enrollment Equity Pathways Framework, which is documented in these two pieces here. This is basically an extension of the principles in the Guided Pathways Framework, which aims to help students and to provide institutions and practitioners with strategies to better help students through stronger outreach to students, specifically being more intentional about who are the students who get offered and encouraged to participate in dual enrollment coursework. These are principles also around the alignment of dual enrollment courses to their colleges and degrees and careers, around the advising that these students receive, not only at the beginning of their dual enrollment path, meaning that they can explore as early as possible their interest and develop a plan, but also the support that they get throughout, even once they reach the post-secondary institution, which ultimately translates into support to students. I'm bringing this up because as you dig into the data, and as I showed you today, there is a lot of uneven access and a lot of uneven outcomes for dual enrollment students. So these are potential strategies that institutions can use and that you can elevate in among your colleagues to improve these gaps that we observe in the data of dual enrollment. And I'm gonna stop there and open it to questions.
Yeah, actually, Carissa put a question in the chat, but I think it might be helpful if she just asks it. So I'm going to go ahead and allow her mic. And so, Carissa, I think you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you. Thanks.
Okay. So I have a question, and I was trying to read the report as you were presenting, so I might have gotten confused trying to do two things at once. I love the idea of using the age proxy from the historic IPEDS data, but I just kind of want to understand that that's only based on students that are matriculated into the institution of higher education. So if students are taking courses as a non-degree student, they would not have been picked up in that grouping?
So in the report and in the data dashboard as well, I didn't bring it up today, but we have two different dual enrollment students groups that we compare to. So you can look at the outcomes of all dual enrollment students who started taking their courses in the fall of 2015 and basically look at the share of those students who enroll, who complete a bachelor's, associate, certificate degree 4 years post high school completion. Right? That's one metric that's in the report, and that's a metric that's included in the dashboard as well. And that's for basically all dual enrollment students. We want to see, like, I think about it from the perspective of the high school. If I'm a high school and I have my dual enrollment students, I want to see how many of them went to complete a bachelor's.
But I guess my question, I'm sorry.
Yes, I hope this part helps me address your question.
Okay.
The figure that I have here, which compares dual enrollment to non-dual enrollment students, is looking at the students who are enrolled. So basically what we did is that we look at the dual enrollment students who were enrolled in their first year post high school, and we compared them to students who didn't have any dual enrollment coursework and who were starting relatively right after high school based on their age. And we look at their outcomes 4 years after. In the way how we define this group, we are not setting any restriction in terms of whether they're full-time or part-time. If they are reported to NSC, we are accounting for them. We are including them in our accounts. So is that answering your question about who's included in this data?
I think I'm just not following. So the 2015 students how are they identified as dual enrollment students?
Okay, that's a great question. And I was not answering that. So the way how we identify who are dual enrollment students, it's by comparing their first date of enrollment, right? Like the date when their first term starts, which is reported in the NSE data, with the date of their high school graduation. Right? So if they started at college at a date that was before they completed high school, we account that student as a dual enrollment student.
Okay, so the student actually has to be enrolled as a student, but if they're a non-degree student, are they captured?
When you say a non-degree student, do you mean whether they declared a major or?
So at our institution, our
Yes.
students they're non-degree students, and I've found that they historically haven't been included in the IPEDS data because they're not matriculated students.
I see. So in the IPEDS data, it would be hard for me. I guess that the best way to go would be to go into the IPEDS dashboard and try to identify whether your institution is there and whether the numbers make sense for the 2022 and 2023 cohort. For the NSE data, I cannot disclose which institutions are reporting students because of the data sharing agreement that we have with them. We can only disaggregate the data at the state level. In principle, these are students who are matriculated for a course, whether they're degree seeking or not. So like if they showed up as enrolled taking a class, then we're going to be accounting for them. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Tatiana, let
does.
me also add, let me help a little bit with Carissa's question. I think I can help. Carissa, it also depends on how the colleges define dual enrollment. Some do count them as traditional students in the same count, whereas other colleges count them as non-degree seeking students. So it really depends on how your college classifies those students. Now, keep in mind that this new IPEDS data from 2022-23 that Tatiana is referring to, which just came out, is the first time that we've had disaggregated data on dual enrollment students only. Up to this point, IPEDS was including AP and IB in that definition. So we know that what we have from IPEDS for 2022-23 is basically we consider a baseline because colleges have to catch up with the new definition and how they're counting the students. So yeah, I hear what you're saying that your college doesn't count them as degree seeking, but that's a decision your college is making. If whomever answered the IPEDS data questions in your institution, that's probably the best person to ask. Who did they include and how? I'm with
But
Tatiana.
that's just for this year, correct,
That's
Diane?
for 22-23, correct.
Right.
Now, they
I
probably
understand
did
that.
this. It was probably the same person with the previous iPads, or department. But we didn't have that information before.
Right.
We only had under 17. It was a guess.
Right. And for the NSE data, also bear in mind that these are relatively old counts of dual enrollment students because this is the fall of 2015. And we look only at the students who were starting their dual enrollment coursework in that time. So again, these are two different definitions. I do follow Diane in that IPEDS has one definition that's trustworthy to the extent that the institution reported these students as dual enrollment students. In NSE, we have more like a rule. We look at their high school completion date and compare that with their college enrollment date, basically. But that's for 2015. And I imagine that numbers might have changed up until today.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I don't see any additional hands raised. So are we transitioning to the next component now? Okay. Thank you, Tatiana. So I'm going to move over to Danielle. So Danielle, you said you wanted to share your slides, or would you like me to do that for you? Up to you. Oh, aw. And I know Danielle mentioned, Danielle, you are on mute. I know Danielle mentioned that to me that she was going to have to scoot right after her presentation so she could take some questions. And then if there are additional follow-up questions that I'm unable to respond to in her absence, I know so many of the names on here. I have your contact information. I can follow up and get you whatever additional information you might need. So take it away, Danielle.
All right. So I'm going to review a presentation actually that we did in I want to say a couple months ago. And so if we're going to run through it pretty quick. But if you had any additional questions or want more information, I encourage you to check that out. So we're going to look at the dual credit dashboard that we built with Connecticut data. So in the slides, there's a link to that recording. It's on the CSDE YouTube channel. So here we go. So I think you guys know what dual credit is. I'm gonna skip through a lot of these pretty quick. So just a little bit of background. So we got a lot of feedback on indicator 6 of our next generation accountability system because it was originally the percentage of students achieving either a CCR benchmark on at least one of the following: SAT or ACT or AP or IB. And we got a lot of feedback from the field that we should be including dual credit coursework. So we agreed, and so we made an update and added that in. And so the sort of rules that we're following in order to be included, in order to show that you've met benchmarks, they have to earn a C or better. They can only, it has to have been a credit bearing course. It can't just be a pass fail. And we didn't include remedial courses or audited or withdrawn or things like that. So what we did is we put together a data collection from our partner IHEs. So we've got, you can see, I won't read you the whole list, but you can see we've got a bunch of private colleges. We have most of our public colleges. I would encourage you, if you're working with an IHE in Connecticut and you don't see them on this list, please let them know that you'd like to have them added. If for no other reason, then it will help your indicator 6 scores, but also just so that we can see the data and we can help you get more information. So you can get the specific file specifications using this link, but basically we just get information so that we can match the students to our student enrollment data. Some course data, so which school is it from, when did they take it, what's the course name, course title, etc., and then information about the grades and the credits earned. So once we get all of that data from our IHEs, this has to get matched to our public school information system, PSIS, which has the enrollment of all of our students. And we don't have necessarily state-assigned student IDs in the data from the institution. So we use a probabilistic data matching algorithm, a fuzzy matching algorithm, which helps us try to match the records from the universities to the records that we have. It's not a perfect system. We do the very best that we can. We do get results for homeschooled and private school students, which makes our lives complicated. If you're from an IHE and would like to make my life easier, that's the best way is to remove your homeschooled private school students from the collection. But yeah, so we run that, and then once we're done with that, we do some hand matching. Sorry if my dog is making noise. Sorry, that's distracting. So then we get, sorry. So then we have, like I said, we do some hand matching for students who didn't get matched. So some common matching problems. You can take a look at these. You can look at the. I'm so sorry for the barking. I don't know if you can hear it, but feel free to take a look at the video to get more information on that. So then, in order to have this be useful in our dashboard, we assigned SCED codes, not SCED, individual SCEDs, but we assigned SCED subject areas for each course. So these are the classification system that we use for courses in our K-12 course taking. And so even though these are college courses, we figured that, they're also courses being taken by students in high school. So it works. And this gives us a way of categorizing these courses so that we can see, what are the math classes, what are the life and physical science classes, and gives us a good basis for that. So then we had to clean the course data a little bit. You should know in our dashboard, course codes and course titles are standardized within IHE. So if you have Calculus 2 at one college and Calc 2, with Calc 2 with some multivariate or whatever, two courses that sound the same, we did not attempt to standardize the course codes across the two universities. So all of the standardization we do is within each IHE. So if you have two courses with the same content offered at different IHEs, they may have different course codes, they may have different titles. Two courses with the same name might contain completely different content. We did not make any attempt to check that. That's more than we could handle, really. So some examples of changes, intro psych became introduction to psychology and things like that. Cross-listed courses were standardized to the same department. So if you've got art history, it might appear in the course catalog as art and history. So we standardized it so that all of the records were going to the same department so that we can group them accurately. And then, we have some lab and lecture courses. We have some, if they had unique course codes, they became separate courses in the data. If they had the same course code, then it was generalized. So yeah. So we're going to take a look at the dashboard because that's the part that's really interesting. Again, feel free to watch the video for further background and read the report notes, which are on the site. That'll help. So this is the link. You can get it through the slides, or if you're anything like me, you prefer to just have a navigation to get there, because I will lose that link in about 10 minutes. So just go to the regular ed site, which is edsite.ct.gov. And then if you go to instruction and dual credit, you will arrive right here. Okay, so we've got these notes up here, and then our dashboard. So the first thing, the first of the 3 pages is our summary report. So this looks at the number of dual credit courses completed. So keep in mind that only includes students who got a C or better. It only includes, right, these are courses that they made it through, got college credit for, and would likely be able to transfer to another institution. So, and this is a we haven't taken, so if a student takes 3 classes, they appear in the data 3 times. So this isn't 36,000 students, it's 36,000 courses. So, keep in mind, if students take more than 1, they'll appear here more than once. So this first table, I know it's a little bit small, maybe I can make it a little bigger. There we go. So this here just shows you the courses by subject. So this is what we talked about earlier with the SCED codes. You can hover over any of these to get more information. And if you go here, oops, I'll get it here. It's not. you should, yeah, sorry. I'm in the wrong one. This one here, we can maximize. This one here, you can't. So, but if you hover over the ones that you can't see anything, you'll see like engineering and technology, and it'll give you the number of courses completed. We can switch by year as well. So you can see okay, it's gonna, all right, apparently I had it up too long. So you can see sort of the change over time through different school years as well. If you go down further, you'll see our dual credit courses by college or university. So we can see University of Connecticut has a really big presence. And then similar to the one above, you can kind of hover and see all of these different values. And then here you can see your top 10 dual credit courses completed. So, you know, again, if you hover over it, you can see the full title if it's been cut off. But that gives you sort of an idea of what students are taking as a whole. Now, like a lot of our EdSite pages, this is able to be filtered to get more specific information. So you can filter by school district, and then within the school district, you can filter by high school. You can also filter by college sector. So our state, Connecticut State University, so that, Western, Southern, Central, et cetera. And so if you do this, then you'll see only the information for those schools, and you can see Southern has, a much larger portion. And then these will only reflect CSU courses. Similarly, you can filter by our Connecticut State Community Colleges. So, all of the separate campuses are available here. So you can just see how CT State is doing. Private colleges and universities, and then University of Connecticut gets its own group because it is just that cool. And then from the college sector, you can see all of you can select an individual college. So if I want to know how, Norwalk is doing, then I can just filter it to that one campus. Scrolled in the wrong part. And then from here, you can also select your subject. So if you want to see how, information technology looks, you can see this is, 197 courses taken at the Norwalk campus of CT State in information technology. So you can filter it down quite a bit. Just a quick note, if you see these orange things, that just helps you know that you have a filter that is put in. So, sometimes you set something and you go to change it and you don't realize you've removed the filter. So if you're, you can always look up here to see which variable has a filter on it. So this is all well and good, but what happens if you want, an actual data table? I'm not going to go through and write down every single, course and subject and everything else and get all of those numbers. Okay, I'm having trouble here. There we go. So if we want to look at that, you can just go to the interactive data tab. Now, all of these filters will be retained from one tab to the next. So if I removed the filters so we could see all students, but if you leave those filters up here, they will move with you from tab to tab. So here we can see the courses completed across time. So we've got 2018-19 through this past school year. And on this one, you can actually choose the variables by which you want to disaggregate. So if I'm interested in, looking at college sectors, which college sectors had, which subjects, I can, this is the Connecticut State Universities by community college, and you can see each of those, and you can, if I want to break that down by gender, I can do that even further. So you get all of this information aggregated however you would like, and then from here you can also filter it. So if I want to know, if I want to see that just by Connecticut College, I can do that. Or if I want to see it by, all the colleges, but I just want to see human or information technology. Now I have all of that information, but I just have it for information technology. So you can really bring all of this down to whatever level you'd like. And then, of course, once you're done, you can export it to Excel so that you can play with it to your heart's content. So you can get lots of information there. And then the last thing, and I think possibly my favorite on here. So if a college or if a high school wants to know, okay, we would like to offer financial literacy, or we want to offer chemistry or whatever, but they'd like some information. They'd like to know who would be someone they could partner with. You can go to this search course title. So this doesn't give you enrollment, but it does give you a list of everything that's been offered. So again, you can select however many school years you want, and let's say I want to find chemistry. That's interesting. It doesn't like me today. Oh, because I have information technology selected, which would make sense. Chemistry is a life science. Okay, so if I put in chem, now I can see, all right, you've got a lot of people who went to University of Connecticut. We've got, these, we've got Central and Western. So you can get an idea of where to go to get more information. And then you can also, that's what I was looking for. If I scroll across, you can also see which districts and schools have offered that class. So, I can look for, if I'm in Hartford and I want more information, I can say, hey, East Hartford was doing this and they're pretty close. I can talk to them or, find other schools that are offering the same courses. So it gives you a good resource, I think, to partner up with other people and find out what everyone else is doing. So, yes, I think that's pretty powerful. So there's, I think I am running close on time, so I'm going to stop and see if anyone has any questions. Oops, I did not.
I don't see any questions yet. And if you're someone who's used this dashboard to try to get to the answer of a question you had, we'd love to know that. And you don't have to share it now, but if you want to send it in the chat or send us an email, we like to hear the real use cases. I have a couple of instances where people have asked me questions. I was like, oh, go to our dashboard. I think you can probably drill down and get the kind of information you need to answer that question you have about dual credit. So if you have those examples, I'd love to hear them so that we can share them more broadly. I think we're quiet on the question front.
They
Danielle,
are.
you might be able to go back to your vacation.
All right.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, everyone.
I appreciate
Thanks.
it. Now, moving forward. Okay, so now we have all this wonderful data and all these great numbers. So now what? So I'd like to introduce Ray Chard from Ames Community College, and he's going to help you guys sort through some of this. Thanks for joining us, Ray.
Yeah, thank you. And Renee, could I call a quick audible? My screen is acting up here a little bit on my end. Do you mind? Could I share it? Could you share it from your side? And I think I see an option to advance the slides from my perspective. So I think that just might be the cleanest way. Sorry, I put you right on the spot, right in the middle of this transition.
Hold on, I got it. And the whole, you actually do need to tell me when to change the slides, because when I'm in this mode and you forward the slides, it only forwards on your end. So
okay.
that's a Teams tip right there. Okay.
Teams tip. All right, great.
Let me go to the right place.
Here's a quick snapshot of everything we've just talked here today. So everybody, make sure you get your quick your TikTok scroll right now of everything that's just happened. So
I'm gonna make you dizzy here.
Yes, for sure.
Oh gosh. Okay, here we go. We're almost there.
Perfect. Awesome.
There we go.
2 more slides. The suspense is here. All right, we made it. Awesome. I'll have you go back one just for a second, Renee.
Okay.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Happy to be here. This is my second time helping with the webinar series. And so my name is Ray. I serve as the Executive Director of High School Programming for our local community college. I'll tell you a little bit more about us in a second. And we use high school programming as sort of our umbrella term. So whatever word you use, concurrent, dual credit, the number, early college, all of those programs, we just call it under the high school programs umbrella for our college. Makes it easy for us to kind of navigate the language in some cases, which can be kind of tricky. So next slide is a little bit more about who we are. We're Ames Community College. Just a real quick brief overview. We are a fully accredited 2-year public institution. We have 4 campuses. In Greeley is our mothership, Fort Lupton, Windsor, Loveland. If you've been to the great state of Colorado, we're about an hour north of Denver. So we deal with the northern range of the state. We deal with some of the suburban areas, but we also deal with schools that have as little as like 5 or 8 students in their graduating class. We have a very unique region that we cover in northern Colorado. And if you're not familiar with Colorado, real quickly, our community colleges do serve about 85% of the concurrent enrollment in the state, and community colleges largely serve as the career and technical education arm or educator in the state of Colorado. So we have some technical institutions, but those are more on the private side. The community college system does provide construction and welding and nursing and automotive, and that's a lot of the work that we do at Ames Community College. And the next slide tells you the most important fact. We're the aardvarks. I mean, like, that's pretty cool, moment for our college. So with that, I have a couple of, I want to ground us in a research study, and I'll go to the next slide here. This pep talk is something that NACEP publishes each and every year. They're called Program Equity Practices. They have 1 or 2 that they do roughly a year. And a recent one that came out last year was Strengthening Partnerships Through Data and Communication. And one of the authors, pretty tall guy with a beard, semi-good at golf, likes his Mountain Dew and IPAs. That was me. But I helped co-author a part of this publication with NACEP the previous year. And I want to kind of ground us in a couple of quotes from this publication that I think is really helpful for us to just kind of think about what we're going to do on an institutional level. So go ahead. As partners engage in this important, complex work, and that work really is addressing equity issues within our programming, which we've heard a little bit about today, we must leverage programmatic data to understand who participates in programs and build strategic conversations around closing equity gaps. Another note that NACEP puts in the very closing sentences of the opening section is that NACEP challenges its members in the dual and concurrent enrollment community to evaluate data through a student demographic lens with metrics like persistence rates, credit hours attempted, course offerings, course modalities, and SIG. So really what that's telling us is this is the best practice. Like, part of the work that we have to do as practitioners, part of the standards that we need to hold is really to take a close look at this at our programmatic data. And I think one of the things that we want to think about when we think about these terms like programs of privilege versus programs of equity is part of that work is to really making sure that we're looking at that macro level data through the lens of student demographic and student participation through that lens. So here's what we're going to do today. I have a couple of goals. One of them is just we want to talk about some examples of how we utilize, data reports. The state of Colorado has lots of these really awesome data dashboards as well. So I'm talking a little bit about how we do that here locally at Ames Community College. I want to talk about how we leverage our institutional level data to address some equity gaps. And then you might be thinking, like, where do I even start with this conversation? Which is totally fine. So I think we can talk about that just a little bit here today. So I'm going to start with just 3 examples that I think are helpful. And of course, we have some of our folks from the CCRC here with us today, which is awesome. This is another publication that just recently came out, I think just a couple of months ago, talking about this idea of what do dual enrollment students actually want in their experience. And if you haven't read it, it's really great. It's got some really great data in there. But one of the first findings that is in this publication is that at the end of the day, what students want more than anything, and Renee, if you'll go to the next slide for me, one of the number one findings is that students just simply want to know about their options within concurrent enrollment earlier. And of course, if you read the study, there's some really great stuff here, but I want to kind of share how we've taken some of this data on a national level and really taking it down to our local level. And so it might beg the question, like, well, where are they learning about these options from? And if you go to the next slide, I'll share another research study that I was a participant on a couple of years ago with the state of Colorado, was looking at this idea of blurring the lines between post-secondary, secondary, and workforce. It was a 1-year task force that I served as the higher ed representative on. And during this task force, we brought in some consultants in to do interviews across the state of Colorado, interviewing parents and teachers and advisors and administrators and just community members about concurrent enrollment. And one of the questions we asked them was, where did you learn about concurrent enrollment, or how did you learn about concurrent enrollment? And you know who the number one subgroup of individuals that they shared was the number one source of that information for them? And Renee, drum roll please for that next slide. It was their teachers, which was super, like a really aha moment for us, because like we're sitting around, there's like 30 of us around a room having conversations about crafting policies for the state of Colorado, and there wasn't even a single teacher sitting around the room talking about helping us craft these policies. And of course, if you're a practitioner, you know that teachers are the secret sauce, right? No matter how good the program is, if you don't have a teacher that's bought in, it's oftentimes really hard to get off the ground. The number two was fellow students. And so it's this really interesting dynamic when we think about the importance. And so we think about this from the national level data is telling us kids want to know about these programs earlier. They want more information about their options. Now we got to figure out who they get the information from. And so for us, we really shifted a lot of our practices. Now what we do during our teacher onboardings that we do at our higher ed institution every year for our concurrent enrollment instructors, we equip them with this information because we know that teachers or that students are going to be asking them, should I be in concurrent enrollment? Should I be doing these things? What are the benefits? We all know them here. We share them with our counseling teams. We share them with our school administrators. We just forgot to share them with our teachers. So we started making that part of our standard practice on a regular basis. Here's what the data is saying. Here's why students should participate. Here's what your equity data is looking at your school. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So that's one example. Here's another example of how this kind of came up for us. And the state of Colorado does this really great annual report. It's part of our state legislation that there has to be an annual report that's done by our Department of Education. And one of the interesting findings, and if you go to the next slide here, they publish all these really great pictures. You saw these dashboard things, right? You all now know how to get that at your state, which is great. Share those things. It's really helpful to tell your story. But in one of the studies that they did last year, they shared this interesting tidbit that if they looked at students basically from like 2018 to 2020, and Renee, if you go to that next slide for me, please. They saw a really interesting jump in the increase. They saw a 23% of increase in African-American and Black students participating in concurrent enrollment in a 2-year window. They saw an 18% increase in Latinx and Hispanic students participating, an 18% increase in participation in Asian students. So it's like, what happened here? Like, how did this big jump? I mean, this is a pretty significant jump in a 2-year window for our state to see these big jumps in some of these equity issues. The reason why that they cited for this to happen was it was simply about communication. They found that the number one thing, and again, this ties back to the previous slide, is that really these communities were just not getting the information. They weren't getting communicated to by, so simply by targeting communication to certain subgroups, they saw a 10-20% increase, a fold increase in their student participation over a couple year window. That's really powerful for us, that we can really start to leverage that. And that research study is actually what kind of spirited the kind of the thing I really want to share with you today, which is what this might look like on an institutional level. And these are some things that I affectionately call school report cards. But our institution publishes individual school level data for every single one of the schools that we partner with. And we share this data back with our educational providers each semester to kind of give them a snapshot of, hey, what did our partnership look like between our two institutions? And what we've created is sort of this one-page profile, this school report card to say, hey, thanks for partnering with our higher ed institution. Here's what it looked like this year. Here's the students that participated. Here are the demographics of those students. And it's a one-page report that looks just like this. Now, this report that we're looking at here is the all AIMS data. So that's the other thing that we do with this report is we publish it internally for our college. So we have an all AIMS look at some of these things. And we're going to go through each one of these little sections really quickly to kind of share what's in this report. And so one of the things that we started to do is we started off the report with the macro level picture. How many students are there? How many credits did we attempt? What was the average number of credits that were earned by those students? And how many degrees and certificates did we award? Again, we have a lot, I think maybe more compared to other institutions because we do a lot of certificate work at our college. And then let's look at the demographic breakdown. You know, what is our gender breakdown? What is our race and ethnicity breakdown? What's the first generation student breakdown? And we publish this for every single one of our schools. The tricky part, we have over 70 partner schools. I have no idea what the gender breakdown or I'm sorry, what the race and ethnicity breakdown is for each one of those schools, but the school does. And so what we actually found out about this report when we sit down and meet with our local educational providers and we have a little look and we look back to the previous year and we do planning for the next year, we ask them some really important questions. And this little piece of demographic information, which seems so simple, really became the most powerful thing that we started sharing with our schools. Because now we could start to ask them really meaningful questions like, what does this data look like? How does this data compare? Does your concurrent enrollment student population match the demographics of your overall student body? Are there some groups overrepresented and underrepresented? We had a school one year, we get down there and it's 90% male students that are participating in concurrent enrollment. We said, okay, well, let's talk about this a little bit here. What's going on here? Well, it was an automotive pathway with the specialized CTE center. You can think naturally through that, but like, is that a problem? Let's have a conversation about that. Are we concerned about this? Do we want to increase some student representation here? These are some really important questions. You know, and then this ties to all the stuff that we've been hearing about today, right? Communication is critically important. Are we getting the message out to these families and these communities? Are there any barriers in participation? Again, the CCRC folks shared a lot of great ideas about how barriers can occur. Let's talk about this. Does this barrier happen to be preventing one certain subgroup population versus another? All of those sort of questions. If there's a financial thing, is that a barrier that we need to have a conversation about? So became a really interesting place for us to have some really meaningful conversations with our schools with the data literally in front of us. Hey, you had 320 kids participate, 35% were Latinx. Does that match your student population? Yes, no, maybe so. Where are we at? Is that an issue? What should we do about it? So really powerful stuff there. The other pieces on this chart, which I think are interesting, we include course level taking behavior. Again, this is really just thinking about it as modality. Where is the class happening? Is it at the high school location? Is it on our campus? Is it online? And we break this down by how students are, how successful they are in the course. We break it down by a success rate, which implies that they've got they got a grade that will give them a passing grade in the course and allow them to move to the next course in the sequence, or the completion rate, which basically means that they completed the course. And then we also break down the grade percentages, what percentage of students get at least an A, a B, a C, a D, and an F in each one of these various modalities. Really cool conversations. And online and remote has gone down quite a bit over in the post-COVID pandemic, but we could see that there was about a 10% discrepancy in success rate between on-campus face-to-face modality and online modalities across our programs. We had some really interesting data to have some conversations about that across the board. And then the back of this page, I'll kind of show it to you kind of in one snapshot. The number we add, like, hey, this is how much money you saved with participating in these programs, which is a really great tool for us. So when we're sitting with our schools, they love that so they can go tell their community, hey, we saved you all $100,000 in tuition this year by participating in these programs. And then the bottom of that page, and this is the area where we're working on it a little bit to get this fine-tuned, and I'm super excited that there's more national level data available. We also track what matriculation rates look like from each one of our individual schools. So once our students participate in concurrent enrollment with a local high school, we want to know how many of them are actually coming to Ames Community College after they get done with their concurrent enrollment experience post-high school graduation. So we track that data there, really helpful data for our enrollment teams, really helpful data for our communication teams internally. Also gives us some really interesting conversations with our high school partners as well to say, hey, how do we up this? How do we get more pathways to our college? All that great stuff. Enrollment funnels are important. So that's our school profile stage. So hopefully you've seen like how do you take national level data to bring it down to the local level, right? Through those kind of steps. Here's an example of what state level data does for us and how we interpret that locally. And then how our local data, we really use that to address some of those those equity issues that we see. So I'll leave you with this. There's just a couple of things. One, I would start with the conversation with your local education providers or your partners. One of the most powerful things we did before we embarked on this journey was we had our advisory committee that we bring in once a year that is like superintendents and administrators and things from our schools, and just said, what data do you all care about? What's important? What's important to you all? What's important to us? Let's have a conversation. Would this be useful? Would this not be useful? And then build a list of what you really want to know. It's the sort of the old adage that you measure what you care about. So what do you care about as an institution? If equity issues and student participation is a big issue for you and you're really honed in on that, let's talk about it. Right now for us, we have a lot of pathway work happening at our college. We want to make sure that the credits aren't random acts of concurrent enrollment, right? That the credits are leading to degree and certificate programs. So we're doing a lot of data diving right now on students and participation in programs, declaration in programs, completion rates in programs. That's a big thing that we're looking at right now as a college. You've also got to know what data is available to you. I think we've gotten some great national data here. Sounds like we got some state level information for you all. Some data we would love to have in the state of Colorado. I want to know how many of our students go to the workforce right out of concurrent enrollment experience. I would love to have a better picture of what that looks like. Again, we do a lot of career and technical education coaching. We don't have a really great way to measure workforce participation post concurrent enrollment at this time. So again, this is something that we're thinking about as a college. We don't report on it. We don't have a really great metric to do that. And then you definitely want to make sure that your language matches, you know, like at our college, we love FTE. Oh man, we just want to talk about FTE is the only thing we want to talk about. We have 1,500 students, but it equates to a 419.6 FTE. That number means nothing to our high school partners. They don't know what FTE is. I don't even know how they calculate it at our college, to be honest. It seems like it's a mythical thing, but like our high school partners, FTE was not something that was incredibly important to them, right? And so I think you want to think through this. What is the data? What is the communication that we want to have? What are the actual data points that are really critical for both of us? Because we want to make sure that this is a useful piece of information. Of course, data accuracy is a big deal. I've been we've had our institutional research team in the IPEDS data numerous times to double check what IPEDS is showing. It looks like it's pretty accurate from our perspective. Also, just doing internal data checking, providing some opportunity for your external partners to check that data is a big deal for us as well. And I think this is the most important thing for me. And I'm sure there's somebody on here that loves these spreadsheets and loves these data things, and they can make things super duper pretty. I have an amazing, talented person on my team who can do that. I don't. I can't do that. And I think one of the main things that we have found that is so helpful for our schools, we have so much data, but if we give data to our schools and we ask them to manipulate the data, they're just not going to do it. And so one of the things that we really wanted to do in our data sharing process, that's why we came up with a really pretty template sheet that we can just share because it makes it useful. Now schools, and we share the raw data with them as well if they want to slice and dice it, and there's some more layers to the raw data behind the sheet that they get. But what they can do now is they don't have to think about it. They can take that data sheet and they can just put it in their board reports, right? They can take that data sheet and they can publish it online. They can take that data sheet and have meaningful conversations without feeling like that they have to manipulate the data. And so that was a really critical piece for me. I'm always thinking about that. There's some great tools out there, the Tableaus and all that stuff in the world that make data useful and interactive. But I think anytime you're sharing data back and forth and trying to tell a compelling story, I think it's really critical that the data is super useful. And for me, that just means visually appealing, visually functional. It says what it needs to say, and people don't have to question what's going on with that data. So all of this isn't great. If you thought this was awesome, no stress. Go on NACEP's website, find the pep talk. It's broken down in great detail about all of these various steps that we did as a college. This has been about a 4-year journey. So now we have 3 years of data on every single one of our schools, which is really amazing. We'll be publishing our 4th round of data now. And so the conversation that we can have with data trends and where efforts are going and how we're making improvements on those various efforts, it's so nice to have that data to back up the amazing story of concurrent enrollment. So thank you.
Ray, quick question for you. If they want to get a copy of your report or the template, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so now throw. I'll make sure my name is in the chat. I believe it was on the very first slide that I had put up there. Was please feel free to email me. Happy to help. NACEP also did do like a neutral format of one of the templates. It's on the website, on the NACEP website as well. And then, I think most colleges, hopefully, or most institutions have somebody who can do a little bit of Photoshop or Adobe work. I've heard great results, and really, to be honest, some of that local reporting has become some of the national practice. Lots of huge institutions are doing this on a regular basis, and I've heard it's just been game-changing for them to be able to have this partnership data readily available. So yeah, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'm always happy to help.
Thanks, Ray. Yes, it is available on the nacep.org website underneath our resource center, along with many other resources.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ray, so much. I appreciate you being here with us today. Are there any questions for any of the presenters? Doesn't look like it, Renee. So before I turn this back over to Renee, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, NACEP. And Renee, if you could advance that next slide, I'd appreciate it. Look for more events for NACEP in 2025. We've got several webinars and an in-person accreditation institute coming to your state. So we're excited to come back to Connecticut in the coming year. So thanks again. We really appreciate it. Thanks for having us.